I'm so excited to invite to our stage this morning someone I call a friend who I have known since, I think, 1999. We met at an event in Houston. Dallas Willard's book, The Divine Conspiracy, had come out. We had a conference down in Houston. That's where I first met Juanita. Juanita Rasmus is a pastor, spiritual director, contemplative, with a passion for outreach to our world's most impoverished citizens. She co-pastors a church, St. John's United Methodist Church in downtown Houston, with her husband Rudy, who is awesome and has written a great book on service. In 2009, Juanita was diagnosed with kidney cancer, and that was a test of her faith, but she was able to wait and see what the Lord would do through that. And it was during that time period that she felt a call to found in August of 2010 the Art Project Houston. Emerging from her recovery from cancer, she built TAFT, because we like acronyms, the Art Project Houston, a therapeutic art program for the homeless, for the hungry, the transitioning community of Houston, and those concerned about their plight. During her own battle toward the recovery, she rediscovered her artistic abilities and what that could mean for her own healing, and she wanted to share that with others. Her hope and desire for the project is to help people express their creativity and thus empower them through artistic endeavor. She's familiar to our stage. She's been at TAG before, and we love having Juanita. I'll say this, and probably everything I told you about her bio you won't remember, but you will remember this. And that is that her church, St. John United Methodist Church, was the home of the group Destiny's Child. Those girls grew up in women, I guess, not girls. They were girls. The women grew up in that church and loved Rudy and Juanita. In fact, when Beyonce got married, she asked Rudy and Juanita to officiate their wedding. So, it's like, hey, what'd you do last week, Juanita? Oh, just married Jay-Z and Beyonce, Me and Bay. They'll remember that, won't they? They will. All right, let's welcome to the stage our next speaker, Juanita Rasmus.
Good morning. It's good to be with you this morning. I want to especially thank you, James, for having me here, but also want to thank Kara and thank Barbara and Melissa for their kindness towards us in our being here. My talk this morning is The Creative Encounter, and I borrowed that title from Dr. Howard Thurman, who is rapidly becoming one of my heroes in the faith and in the contemplative way of life. Dr. Thurman wrote this in his book, Jesus and the Disinherited. Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. I believe that the creative encounter with beauty can awaken us and transform us, and it can enliven us. James, in his new book, The Magnificent Story, says that the Bible really doesn't use the word beauty as much as it uses the word glory. Glory is beauty, goodness, and truth combined with power. The psalmist declares, the heavens are telling the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims his handiwork. I've seen the glory of God revealed as beauty, and sometimes it's been a simple awareness of one that you would have to have known the story of. One of the artists, that's what we call the men and women who attend the Art Project in Houston. The men and women who are often homeless, but the men and women who will brave our doors and bare their souls before simple art-making tools. I've seen goodness. I saw goodness in Carolyn when I've met her probably 15 years or so ago, and she's been homeless at least that long. Carolyn was very guarded and still is somewhat guarded, but when we first met Carolyn, she said, call me neighbor. She wouldn't tell us her name. And so we obliged, we called her neighbor, probably for about 2 years. And then we invited her to be a part of the art project. And one day, Carolyn said, you can call me Pam. And so we called her Pam. We obliged because she was trying to find out if we were real or not. And then sometime thereafter, she said, Juanita, my real name is Carolyn. I've seen goodness as The art project has empowered men and women to come and be in the experience of community, to be in a place where they might be known. I've seen the art project and the creative processes, the use of imagination and very simple tools invite people into the goodness of God. Sometimes there are no words to express how we're feeling. There are times when we can be muted because of our pain. But I've seen creativity awaken men and women to a God who loves and who loves deeply. Carolyn told me not long ago, she said, "Juanita, I'm an intercessor, you know." I said, "Oh, really?" Which I really did know that, because there have been times when Carolyn has prayed things that have happened in our church that no one could have known about but the Holy Spirit. Carolyn said, "I'm an intercessor, and so I pray for the art that we create and sell through the art project." Did you know that I did that? And I said, "No, I didn't." And I know you're an intercessor. I recognize that. But then it dawned on me, Carolyn, the intercessor, has been praying over the art that we have available outside in the lobby, if you'd like to pick up a piece. And I had never thought to pray over the art. And I, too, am an intercessor. I've seen Carolyn receive the generosity and goodness of others around her, and now she embodies that in her own way. Not in a gregarious way, not a loud way, but in her own quiet and still somewhat guarded way. I've seen the beauty of goodness in Carolyn. I've witnessed goodness and truth in a burned out youth pastor who had been trained by Duke. And she had been serving youth for about 10 years. And she came to us and partnered with me in assisting us in helping to form and shape the Art Project Houston. She helped me bring it to life. While she served to facilitate the birth of the Art Project, her engagement in the process birthed something new and fresh and alive in her. It birthed in her a true and more expansive calling than just theologian. But it birthed in her an artist and an activist. In her private, personal, and individual creative exercises, I've seen beauty as the presence and the glory of God have revealed itself in her art, all kinds of art, encaustic art, contemporary paintings, and works that she's now being commissioned to do for churches in Houston. Dr. Smith says that glory is beauty, goodness, and truth combined with power. Beauty and the experience of creativity have aroused my sister friend, pastor, artist, theologian, activist. I've seen her experience new freedom. As she's empowered others to experience new freedom. Her art making has empowered her to enter into new spaces and places of truth, her own truth. And for me, that's been beautiful. You know, it's amazing to think that you would get something like cancer and that anything really beautiful could come out of it. But that's what I've been able to experience these past 6 years as I've recovered from cancer and seen God do something extraordinarily beautiful, not only in my life, but in the lives of many people around us. Creativity and art making, the use of our imagination, that includes problem solving for those who don't see themselves as the creative type. But in reality, we are all creative types. We all have an imagination, and each of us selects and utilizes various tools by which we create. Napoleon Hill said this, and I love it. He said, "The time will never be just right. Start where you stand and work with whatever tools you may have at your command. and better tools will be found as you go along. So it's whether baking a cake or brewing homemade kombucha, creating a safe space for troubled youth, or solving a mysterious equation, coloring in an adult coloring book, being a stay-at-home father, a flash fiction writer, a dancer, an actor, or facing the challenges of being a technological genius. We are all images of the great Creator. And so we too create in some way or another. We are all given to interact with our interior world, and it is there that God longs to meet us, engage us, woo us, awaken us, and where love can heal and transform us. This is what I've seen art making and creativity do. They have been a means whereby God has entered into the hearts of women and men who have felt that they, in some ways, had no other means available to them for which they might connect with the experience of God in an authentic way for them. Dr. Howard Thurman, I mentioned him earlier, was an African-American mystic, philosopher, and theologian. And he served as Dean Emeritus of the Marsh Chapel at Boston University until his death in 1981. He established the first church that was non-denominational and totally open to every race in San Francisco, California. In his book, The Creative Encounter, Dr. Thurman tells of a friend who was having great difficulty because he could not establish any authentic basis of communication with his landlady. He observed one day that her idea of a gentleman was a person who kept the ashtrays empty. And so he decided that day, I'm going to make it my business to keep the ashtrays in my room clean and empty. And so he decided not only would he keep his ashtrays clean and empty, but every time he went through the living room, he'd assure that those ashtrays were clean and empty as well. And he did this, and it worked like magic. You see, it established a basis of communication with his landlady. And that eventually led to understanding at many levels of appreciation. You see, he met her at the level of the ashtrays. Dr. Thurman wrote that in religious experience, God meets the individual at the level not only of the individual's needs, but also, in my judgment, more incisively, at the level of his residue of God meaning. And he goes forward from there. Many of the people that we've served over the years, due to addiction and undiagnosed mental illness and sometimes just sheer heartbreak out of living in a difficult world, have felt as though they've burned their bridges, including some have believed their bridges to God. The Art Project has given our participants the raw basic materials, like the basics that you'd find in a child's back-to-school pack: scissors, watercolor, crayons, rulers, paintbrushes. And with these very basic tools, a basis of communication has been made available. They have been met by God at the level of their residue of God meaning and have begun to interact and wrestle and escape from the harsh realities of their circumstances to be embraced. And yes, over time, some have even found a bridge back to God, to themselves, and to others. Simple art tools have become how they have met God at the level of the art supplies. This was my experience when I was diagnosed with cancer 7 years ago. Now, I had a relationship with God, but there is something about going to the doctor with indigestion and walking out with a cancer diagnosis that can stun you, cause you to be speechless, and I'm generally not at a lack for words. that experience left me numb. And so I found language. I found a basis of communication when I went to the Cynical Retreat House, which is a retreat facility run by Cynical Sisters in Houston. And there they've established a small room with simple tools: crayons, watercolor, brushes, scissors, magazines, and glue. And so I walked into the art cove and I sat down, and as the nuns sometimes do, they will leave a suggestion of a possible activity you might consider in that space. And so that particular day, the invitation was to participate in magazine meditation, which is kind of the equivalent of Lectio Divina with a magazine image. And so I picked up a magazine and I began to flip through the pages, and as I flipped through the pages, there was an image, and I said, that's not the one. And I kept flipping, and you know how it is. Usually the one you say is not the one is what? The one. And this particular magazine that I picked up was a magazine that showed copies of original works of art. And I think it was an auction brochure where you could bid on various pieces of artwork. And this particular piece of art was a picture of a little black boy who was probably about 8 or 9. He was about so tall. And standing in front of him was a young woman who was probably in her early 20s, and she was knelt down in front of him. And when you looked at the painting, the little boy was dressed, and matter of fact, so was the woman. They were both dressed in clothes that I would think would be around the era of slavery. And there was a darkness about the part of the little boy. But where the young woman knelt in front of him, there was this radiant light. And so I sat with it. And I was asked or given a reflection sheet, much like the one that you were given today. And as I sat with that piece, the Lord said to me, Juanita, the healing that you need is greater than the cancer diagnosis. The healing is for a deeper wound. And over time, the Lord revealed to me what the wound was. You see, that little boy who was in that dark part of the picture represented me. You see, somewhere I had this sense that my parents wanted a boy, and they got a girl. And so I've lived a lot of my life trying to prove that I was good enough and that I would be the best girl boy they could have ever had. And so that meant I lived for other people's acceptance and approval, and I needed certificates and approval and awards and trophies and pats on the back to affirm that I was good enough. But that day, and in the days to come, as I continued to look at that piece of artwork and I continued to invite God to speak to me, God told me that I was the woman kneeling in front of that little boy, and that I would be free from the slavery of needing to be my father's son, that I was my father's daughter, in whom he was well pleased. And so, yes, I've seen simple art tools, simple magazine pieces of art speak profoundly into my life, and not only into my life, but into the life of others. Who would ever imagined that that image would have had such a profound impact on my real healing? God met me at the level of the art supplies. My mentor and beloved friend, Dallas Willard, was quoted saying that beauty is God's goodness made manifest to the senses. Isn't that beautiful? Art making is a means of opening oneself, one's senses to God in such a way, much the same way as any of the contemplative practices like the examine or journaling or practicing the presence or rest or unplugging or self-care, jogging in nature or meditation. Art making can invite us into a space of the creative experience as an encounter with God, where there's the basis of a new way of communicating. So that if you don't have the words, it's okay. Dr. Thurman's book, The Creative Encounter, was published by Friends United Press, and it speaks well of the experimental and practical religion in which Dr. Thurman says that we are often afraid to feel deeply, and that many of us escape our feelings, and that affects the human spirit. And it creates for most of us very real conflict. Dr. Thurman noted that the religious experience involves the individual, and that means the total individual, including feelings and emotions. Thurman discusses the inwardness of religion or religious experience as an inner process, or more accurately, as an inner event or a series of events. And he sets forth a working definition of religious experience as an encounter between humanity and God. And he suggests that there are two principal disciplines that are involved in this encounter. And he says that one is prayer and the other is human suffering. What one determines to be beautiful, I believe, is probably deeply rooted in our own unique mosaic of personal experience. Much of what one might experience in the creative process has its roots in one's own suffering. And the creative process can be a type of spiritual practice that includes, no doubt, the discipline of prayer and silence and solitude and many of the other disciplines. But in this discipline, the sense of being in communication with God about what we and God are thinking and doing together. This is what I found in the practice of art making. We've held what we call paint parties, and they are our annual fundraisers for the art project. And they're both disenfranchised men and women who are homeless, who are hungry, who are considered the disinherited, the least, the last, and the lost, are invited to attend these paint parties. And then the patrons who help underwrite the paint party are there as well. And one of my favorite experiences of the paint party was a friend of mine who is a Wharton Business School graduate who was sitting there, and she sat next to Mary, who's one of the artists in the art project, and Mary is homeless. The woman who is the Wharton business professional, I'll call her TW. TW sat down next to Mary, and they're together for the next 50 to 60 minutes as they sat next to each other, each with their own story, their own canvas, their own palette, and their own paint. I saw them share the glory of God as truth and healing. You see, what Mary didn't know about TW is that TW had experienced a traumatic experience in elementary school where she drew a picture and the teacher said it was bad. If I ask us to raise our hand, many of us would be able to say that happened to me too. And so is there no wonder why creativity for many of us has never even crossed our minds as a way and a means of being present, as communicating with God? And so TW had that experience, and she sat there in front of the canvas and with the paint and the brushes, and Mary sat to her right, and Mary coached her through picking up the brush and painting. Now, there was an instructor standing in front of the class leading us all through this process. But Mary saw that TW needed something more. And Mary, like the woman who in the Gospels puts her mite in the offering plate, Mary put her offering into TW. And she encouraged her the entire time we were together. I found it out later because TW told me. She said, I came to paint, but I got something far greater. Art making can release us to communicate with each other. As Dr. Thurman wrote, as sharers of what each in our own way have discovered of our experience of God, no longer under the necessity to defend anything, but free to be to each other what is most fundamental to us both. Our nation needs this kind of freedom. The freedom where each of us can be who we are fundamentally. Children of God. Red, black, yellow, white. For we're all precious in God's sight. Art making and the experiences of creativity and the use of the imagination have the capacity to free us and to invite us into an authentic religious experience, offering us all a basis of communication and the awakening possibilities of knowing beauty, goodness, truth, and power. I believe these are God's gifts to us. I'd like to move us now into an experience because I believe experiences have the way of leading us into spaces that sometimes, as I've said throughout my talk, words just might not suffice. You were handed a worksheet when you came in, and it says, reflection, I am. And so I'd like to invite you into this meditation, and if you would, sit up tall and straight in your seats. If you're able to put both feet flat on the floor, and if you can, take out that sheet of paper, and if you need a sheet, raise your hand. They'll pass them out. There's a few people in the very back that need sheets. If you'll keep your hands up until they reach you, get out a pen or a pencil, or if you're lucky enough to have a crayon on you, pull it out. And in this meditation, if you're comfortable with closing your eyes, well, then by all means do so. If you're not, then by all means don't. I invite you, as the last few people are getting their sheets of paper, if you would, sit up again, tall and straight in your chair. My daughter's elementary school teacher used to call this the listening learning position. And so I invite you, if you would, take some deep breaths and breathe in deeply and fully. Exhale deeply and slowly. This meditation is called the gift. And so I invite you to breathe in God's light and love. And as you exhale, exhale all of your limiting thoughts and beliefs. As you breathe in God's peace. And exhale all your anxiety. As you breathe in, allow yourself to breathe in God's perfect love. And as you exhale, exhale all your cares. Just release them like balloons. Let them go. As you continue to breathe in deeply and fully, noticing the cool air coming into your nostrils and the warm air exiting your nostrils as you exhale. Imagine yourself entering into a safe room, a room where you feel comfortable. You sense a compassionate and loving presence with you. When you turn around, you find that that presence is you. You looking at you with deep love and admiration. And as you approach yourself, you find that you are holding something in your hands, and it's for you. It's a gift. You hold out your hands to receive it. You are warmed by a sense of gratitude at this generosity towards you. Looking at the box, You know that it contains something that you will really appreciate. Open the box. When you look inside, you find the thing that you have been needing and desiring for your life. It is exactly what you need. Now, this gift can be something that is tangible or intangible, but just imagine what it is. Take a good look at it. Try it on if you can. Hold it. Engage your senses with it. Examine it. Experience what it's like to have received from yourself this thing that you have been needing. You express your thanks to yourself as you take your gift away with you. So now, would you sketch your gift on the back of that handout? Remember, simple, childlike, and no one's grading. If that gift was a word, write the word. And then when you're ready, turn the sheet over and begin the reflection. This activity, this way of using our imagination can often take a little more time for some of us. And so I would encourage you not to be frustrated if no gift appeared. But what I would encourage you to do is to pay attention to what you felt, because maybe that was the gift. Maybe it was for you to notice that you were feeling angst or anxious or disappointed or stressed or rushed. And so whatever you felt, perhaps you jot that down and explore it later. I usually, when I do this in a workshop, invite sharing, but for the sake of honoring the time that I've been allotted, I'd like to simply close in this prayer from Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, which is our curriculum for the Art Project Houston. And so I invite you, if you will, to join your heart with mine in this prayer. Oh, great Creator, we are gathered together in your name that we may be of greater service to you and to our fellows. We offer ourselves to you as instruments. We open ourselves to your creativity in our lives. We surrender to you our old ideas, and we welcome your new and more expansive ideas. We trust that you will lead us, and we trust that it is safe to follow you. We know you created us and that creativity is your nature and our own. We ask you to unfold our lives according to your plan, not our low self-worth. Help us to believe that it is not too late and that we are not too small or too flawed to be healed by you and through each other and made whole. Help us to love one another, to nurture each other's unfolding, to encourage each other's growth and understand each other's fears. Help us to know that we are not alone, that we are loved and lovable. Help us to create as an act of worship to you. Amen.